Welcome everyone to our April session of Morning Bites. It's not April Fools. Morning Bites with Stu, Jason, and Violet. And this time we have amazing guests. We have amazing guests, two, plural, Bob Parisi and Frank Brennan. We're going to get straight away to Oracle, but I do want to remind you, this is where we're going to talk about cybersecurity and privacy news and what are people talking about? What are we thinking about? But also a 30-minute session. You don't need more than that. Just bite size. And we also want to caveat the views and opinions expressed by everyone here are our own and not that of our organizations that we might represent. All right, Bob, what's going on with Oracle?
Yeah, so Violet, and Stu, Jason, thanks for having me. First of all, what's going on with Oracle is what we see in the news, right? I mean, and we've now seen the revelation that there was a second breach or two breaches. The first one last month that involved basically client data or healthcare data, according to the news reports, and the most recent one that deals with login credentials, which according to Oracle and what I've seen in the news are old. Now, the interesting piece is that this revelation comes at the same time that there is a class action lawsuit that's saying that Oracle, misled, all the
Sweeping under the rug.
the plaintiff's attorney, all the horrors that the plaintiff's bar likes to talk about. But there are some other implications that may come out as we get into this, right?
Can I pause you for 1 second? I forgot
Yeah.
one of the other pieces I was supposed to say in my intro is we figured out how to show the comments. So when people are LinkedIn watching us live, we can actually show the comments and kind of like tease each other back and forth. It keeps them all, keeps the energy up, right? So I'm just going to say comment and we'll see it and highlight it. Okay.
Yeah, let's not encourage comments because I've got
John Molito's out there. I
two
know
of my
he is.
kids in the insurance industry watching this, and they're likely to comment as well. So we'll see what happens. But what's interesting is the class action, and that's around the data that was that was lost or allegedly disclosed or tapped into last month. And they make the standard allegations that they didn't tell. But the point that'll be interesting to see is if this also then triggers some SEC issues, right? We're in an environment now where the SEC is looking at publicly traded companies and how do they disclose what their environment was, and that so it might not just be the class action. From a security perspective, what I found interesting, and I can't say I understood it completely, so I'll look to Frank and Jason to talk about a little bit more, was that the security implications of the breach, there were some watering hole issues, right? There were multiple, the news reports talk about there were multiple tenancies that were potentially tapped into or viewed. And so this might not be the end of the story. We all seen it. The best companies can get hit. No one is immune these days. But I think this might have some legs and might go beyond just a couple of LinkedIn reports, and the lawsuit will be interesting to follow.
Before we get
Frank
into
or
the technical,
Jason, can you describe a watering hole attack? What that is? Can you describe for the audience what that watering hole attack is that Bob mentioned?
Can I describe that?
No, I directed to Frank or Jason.
Before we get into the technical, though, the SEC requirements is 4 days. Like I've been Googling SEC Oracle every single morning when I wake up, trying to figure out if that thing.
Yeah, but they've got that. They've got it's 4 days from the time that they deem it to be material. So it doesn't run.
This could be a test of materiality. Like we've been talking about this theoretically for like 2 years. We've been talking about what is materiality. This could be like we don't know. We don't know what
it could be. It's certainly large enough. It's certainly high profile enough. There's discussion in the press and the media that this could have been handled better. At least the optics of it. I'm not gonna throw stones, but there are there are opinions out there in the press that the revelations and how it was handled, in the spin of it, could have been done better.
I think that's the worst part. The silver lining here is that Target may now get reprieve of having the worst communications post breach. So, kudos to them for that. But the biggest issue that I've seen is that it was the outright denial of an incident. And I get what they were saying, right? It wasn't their current environment, even though they didn't say those words. So I understand the intent behind it, but that intent doesn't translate across the internet very well, especially when you have security researchers just jumping on this to try to figure out, is this real or is it not?
Well, they called it a legacy environment, right? That was what
which is ill-defined. Old credentials, legacy environment, those are terrible words when you're talking about the security of credentials and people's environments. I want that definition. Do I need to reset passwords for my environment from yesterday or from, my test environment 2 years ago? And they're a mature enough company where messaging like that should not be involved with, a magnitude of compromise that we're talking about here. And I agree, Bob. I think it's just going to continue for the next couple of weeks.
Uncertainty. We're just going to sit in this uncertainty for 2 weeks.
Oh, we're going to hear a whole lot of opinions though between now and then.
Yeah, I think they're, they've chummed the water for plaintiff's bar. This will not be the first lawsuit, so we might see another.
So just to try to do some takeaways here, the audience has heard me say this in the past, and my clients hear me say it all the time. In the incident response game, we always preach the twin goals of looking for transparency and competency. And you need both. If you can portray that you're both competently handling the situation and you're being as transparent as possible, given the circumstances, generally speaking, you'll pass muster on the optics of your incident response. And in this situation, what the criticism has both attacked both the accuracy of the reporting from Oracle as well as the transparency. And so take for you, your policyholders and the audience, for your clients, the takeaway is, deal with the facts that you have, reframe them in as positive as a light as you can, but make sure that you can always maintain accuracy and that you're leaning toward transparency at the very least.
I think
no, sorry, go ahead, Val.
I think what stood out to me was the outright denial. There was no wiggle room. There was no potential. There was no maybe. There was no still investigating. There was quotes coming from Oracle leadership that said, again, I'm not trying to pick on them, but there was no wiggle room in the first communication of outright denial. And then denial, I think, even had any and all. I mean, there was a lot of big language in the denial in the first couple of weeks.
So I'll be a bit of Oracle apologist, right? There are a lot of stakeholders out there, and Stu, I'm sure you've dealt with them. You've got law enforcement. There might have been other things going on that had them craft the message. But what I think, and I'll echo Stu what you said with transparency, it's also resilience. Violet, you're on the carrier side now. If you want to see where a lot of money is spent, it's when a company is not prepared to deal with the crisis. Where they are prepared to deal with the crisis, where they've got someone, where they've got a good breach coach on retainer, where they are prepared to deal with the issue. That's where we see the issue not make the news for weeks on end. That's where we don't see the CISO get fired, the restatement of earnings. So that's, hopefully this doesn't become the next test case, and it'll play out better for Oracle than it is in the media at the moment. But we'll see.
I'm kind of jealous that all the comments are directed at Stu. What are we, Jason? Chop liver?
Oh yeah, well, we know our place in the pecking order.
questions.
It's interesting to
Steve?
me though, because like this is a really delicate conversation that I've seen play out before between security leadership or even IR firm and the breach counsel. And I remember early days of this, it was always, I'll say, contentious on, do we try to be conservative versus sticking to facts? Because like from a forensic standpoint or an incident response perspective, like you're not going to have the facts in the first couple of days, maybe. I don't know the specifics of this whole situation, but like even just a week buffer should have been enough time to confirm one way or the other. There are edge cases in here. I could see where if they deleted the whole image of a system or whatever, like there's always these edge cases, but that's where like a conversation has to happen with legal on like, how definitive do you want to be? Because if there's no evidence because you got rid of the evidence, and I'm not saying they did that by any means, right? You can't go out there and say there wasn't an issue, right? So that's where like, I like to listen to Stu and his guidance on this, right? Because like it's a really good conversation to have with your technical team and the legal and figure out what's the right path, because it's going to be situation dependent. But I'm with Stu, like you got to err towards transparency.
I see the question from the comments. I would answer your question by looking at it in a different way, in the sense of the larger the organization, the more institutional of a power structure they have. I would suggest that would also be correlated to their ability to withstand a crisis, especially one of involving cybersecurity. In our experience, you look at some of the largest security incidences in history, and those companies are doing just fine years later. So I don't know, as far as, is there a greater duty to disclose? I think that there's a lot going on with Oracle. There's SLAs. They've got, contracts that they have to follow. There's a lot going on there. I am not their counsel. I wouldn't be on the show right now if I was.
Well, there's another question, and I know that we don't, I'm not going to get into it, but we don't like to stay and go into politics at all. But I think the question of just an agency's change during political change is interesting. And actually, Bob, one of the articles that you sent over this morning was specifically about kind of like the change in the direction of these administrative agencies that have cyber as their purview. Frank, what do you think? You've worked for the government before.
There's a reason I left the government and happily came to the dark side of the private sector. What I would say is, I think looking at what kind of regulatory fallout is going to be is a good 6 to 8 months out. I think right now they just know, from what I'm seeing, they didn't like what was there and they want something else. And I'd hope they're not just figuring it out, but it really, from the outside looking in and not being attached to the federal government anymore, looks like they're trying to figure out what that is going to look like. And the SEC is far from anywhere I need to be.
So going back to Nathan Thomas's comment up here, I'm just going to leave it up here. Frank, since you're talking already, what's your story for the week? What's piquing your ears?
Man, so we get to go from this fun stuff about Oracle and trying to not beat up on a company to going on threat actors beating up on themselves and eating their own. And in the ever-changing atmosphere of the threat landscape, I've got to obviously focus on one of my favorites, Dragon Force. Total kill count this month alone is 3 other TAs taken over and removed.
Can you explain for everyone what a kill count is?
Yeah,
you're forensic.
break that down.
I know you need to describe this further.
So for one of them, they definitely took over Eldorado / Eldorado's other name that's eluding me right now, something black, but they're all black something or other. But, we saw earlier this month where security researchers were already investigating potentially open credentials to the backside of Eldorado's TA chats, as well as meaning their chats with their victims of cyber crimes, as well as their release site. And then fast forward, and they actually led to Dragon Force completely taking over and defacing Eldorado's website, publishing some of their chats with a poor victim, allegedly from Iran, who was having a hard time finally getting his last $100 to pay for the decryptor. And it was an interesting case study on how to chat with a threat actor, I think, because I think he was making gains until Dragon Force took over that chat. But then fast forward to just within the last few days, we see RansomHub, not a small name in the threat actor scene, not one of the threat actors that was on the rise specifically this year, with a lot of large victims that have been attacked from this year, both on openly seen publications from their blog, as well as the ones that we don't see where we believe, payment may have been facilitated in order for the problem to go away. But then we see Dragon Force again come in and deface and take over their website. And now what's a little misjointed in the messaging is it a full restructuring and absorbing of the RansomHub into the Dragon Force environment, or is it more a hostile forced takeover where they came in, locked them out of their process and said, hey, you're not getting any of your infrastructure back, but if you still want to do this type of work, come on over here and play with us.
What if it's all just theater? We don't know.
We don't know. And that's the best part of kind of filling through this, is figuring out and watching that. But what we can see is on some of the forums, it doesn't appear like they went willingly and wanted this to happen. So for that part, I'd let Jason come in and, talk a little bit about it. But what I would say is I don't think this was a planned thing on RansomHub side. And I think everything points that this was more a campaign that we're seeing from Dragon Force targeting their opponents to get their control of the market space and to get their name out there, if not through actual attacks, then through attacks on other threat actors, so that they're kicking off the higher end targets, so that they're the biggest fish in the pond.
Yeah, I literally just pulled up their Dragon Force's leak site, and they've got a nice little post in their blog section, and then they end it by saying, "P.S. RansomHub, hope you're doing well. Consider our offer. We're waiting for everyone in our ranks." So to me, it's like a forceful takeover, right? Where they're going in, they probably got access to that infrastructure and basically just gave them an ultimatum. It's like, hey, join our forces or you're done, right? So I'm really interested to see how RansomHub is going to react here, because we had something similar like this happen with law enforcement. What was it, ALPV, where it was a tit for tat. They were going back and forth on who had control over the leak site. So maybe we'll get some new drama here. I'm secretly hoping we do, because
or what if law enforcement comes in the middle of it, right?
Well, and that's just it. It's a great time for law enforcement to be targeting both of these entities, because we do know that there's a disturbance in the force. And, anytime that's out there, there's always an opportunity to inject new personas, new personalities, and try to gain your way into what for RansomHub is going to have to be newly stood up infrastructure. And then for all those victims that were on their current plate of business, what's happening there? And, I personally didn't have any RansomHub cases going on at the time, but I did have some Eldorado cases going on, and, they were dead in the water. Do not pass go, continue the investigation. However, any kind of negotiations, any kind of discussions with the threat actor were cut off, because they're not replying on talks. They're not available in their chat because it was stolen in a turn of events. And I imagine the same's looking that way for RansomHub.
So, Frank, I had a conspiracy moment that I want to run by you.
I love conspiracies.
Give me more.
Now, you're more well versed in Dragon Force than I am. But when I first learned about them, literally last week, I wrote about them in a newsletter. And as I was digging into it more, I was like, this feels like a rogue law enforcement agency that is just operating under, the guise of another ransomware group. I don't know if I don't think it's true, but my mind immediately went there. So I'm curious on your thoughts. Could you see that tactic popping up at any time?
I personally would love, if we look back to the Lockbit and the AlphaV takedown and how differently the EU and Japan play that versus how US plays it. I would not see this as a US-based law enforcement operation. If it was, it would definitely come from outside of someone bound by a constitution. But I think it would make a great story. I don't know if it's actually true, but I could see where there could be instigation to it, right? Where maybe someone is potentially in there inciting these discussions, trying to do it to allow it to dissolve itself without actually initiating it from a law enforcement standpoint. Think of that. If I'm allowing these two top heads to battle it out, someone's gonna win out. And either way, I'm still taking one player off the board. And then as we saw when Alpha V disrupted, we kind of saw that dispersal of Alpha V actors who then started going to these other threat actor sites. And then it either caused that other threat actor to then increase fog, or we see it where it caused them to decrease. And we saw, other things start playing out. So I do think that over the next couple of weeks, this is really where we're going to see some big changes. Because we had RansomHub really on the rise earlier this year. Dragon Force has been on the rise this year. And to kind of see if we see that means RansomHub now starts going away and we see other groups pick up their speed, or if we see Dragon Force absorb all those members and we see Dragon Force really start exploiting folks and growing their numbers of victims.
So all I would add here again is to try to bring a takeaway to the folks, to the people, which is, ransomware is unpredictable. It's unpredictable, and you're dealing with unpredictable technologies. The decryptor tool is not exactly 100%. You're dealing with unpredictable people because they're people who are mixed up with organized crime, and you're dealing with unpredictable processes. And consequently, if you can avoid having to pay extortion, you really, really should. And I know that may seem obvious, but sometimes there's an eagerness to make a payment and make it all go away. And a lot of times, the legal consequences to the attack have kind of already been determined by the time you're even meeting with our law firm. And we really ask you to pause and give some thought. What value am I really getting? Unless you need that decryptor tool and it's a matter of just business life and proverbial life and death, not actual life and death, of course, then
unless you're a hospital.
Yeah, no, that would be actual, right? Yeah. If it's a matter of keeping the business,
just the kids,
need to get the employees paid, that's one thing. But if you can avoid it, you really, really should avoid paying extortion, especially just to suppress stolen data. And I see Steve Stransky's question, and I don't want to not answer it. And I'm not Nostradamus, but I don't know the answer to that question. What I would say though is the question was how is this going to affect the volume of attacks, and similar inter threat actor attacks or conflicts? How will that impact the volume of attacks to businesses, especially here in the U.S.? I don't know. It could go in one way where there's just less people doing this. It becomes more concentrated, or it becomes more competitive because the incentives are greater, and therefore the people who are surviving are the more skilled attackers and the ones that are going to really break through. So I don't know. I wish I had a better forethought on that.
If we look at the historical takedowns, there'll be no impact. Right. And the reason for that is you have your ransomware groups, the RAS, and then you have the affiliates. The affiliates are really the problem. They're the ones that are hacking in most cases, into these companies. The RAS is just facilitating all the tooling. So I mean, look at Lockbit, look at LV, like it had zero impact. It actually just kept going up. So this is, I'm going to say I feel bad for the current victims that are stuck, but this is almost just entertainment. Because you just have these ransomware groups going after each other, there's going to be no impact on the volume.
Bob, I thought I saw you trying to chime in there. Oh, I see that.
You go. You have a question.
Well,
No,
Brandon, I'd love to ask you, what are your thoughts about will there
More
be
hostile
future
actions?
cross threat actor attacks?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's, they don't put any of their tactics back in the bottle. They always double down on the tactics. So I don't expect that to stop. And why would it? I think in the end, it really depends if Dragon Force is able to monetize this, if they gain more affiliates, if they gain more leverage, and they reduce the number of victims that RansomHub was hit. They garner the same initial access vendors, they garner the same targets. So they're reducing competition against that target list. And if they're gaining more affiliates under their RAS, they're now able to provide more troops to task to then go after those targets, which would then in line potentially lead to more money. And if not, at least more notoriety, which is how they then get more troops so they can throw more troops. So it just continues to feed itself.
So Frank, follow-up question. How soon until we start seeing MDR for cyber attackers?
Maybe that's a new market I need to start talking to some of my MDR team about.
I don't think they'll pay their
services?
invoices.
Yeah, hey, like a Lotbit, do you need a vCISO? Because it could happen. Maybe not.
Bob, for a while, I thought you were being really stoic about the Frank telling the story about this attack, and then it occurred to me you were frozen. But
now he's on
glad to see
mute.
that you're back.
He's just very low.
We should play a game where we just say words and he moves his mouth, and we could
Sounds
be like,
like-
"What did we get Bob Parisi to say?" I think you
It's
said
not
something
happening.
about
All right,
something about like high premiums. I don't know. Just throw stuff out there. Sorry, I gotta stop myself now.
That's a shame. I'm sure it would have been.
Jason, what was? Oh wait, Stu, you had a story. What was your story?
No, I want to stay focused here if that's okay, because I feel like there's so much tension here. So I just the threat actors arguing with one another. I hadn't, I'll be honest with you, until you just said it, I had not given thought that it was more of like a hostile takeover in the sense of we want your people, we want your resources. I really thought it was more of just an anti-competitive, let's just take down the opposition type of move. That's really interesting. In that regard, I think to answer the question from a little ago, we might see more of a flourishing of attacks because there would be a sort of like a one larger, monolithic entity that would result from such a hostile takeover.
But you're still limited on the affiliates, right? The number of affiliates is only going to change organically. It's free choice for them on where they want to go operate. I think what could change is if there are fewer RAS groups, you might have a consolidation of rules that they have to follow, none of which I think are going to be favorable to the US, though.
Yeah, I mean, look at correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, 10% is their take for affiliates that are willing to now come over from RansomHub to Dragon Force. And that's considerably
these affiliates are kind of like free agents anyway. They don't really sign exclusivity deals with these groups.
They do not. It's
how
just
much
based on the use of the
How
tool.
much money do you think they're like if you go in the pyramid of like who has the power and like who's getting the percentages, like what do you think these people are making, Frank?
Billions.
Violet's thinking.
Frank and I are both thinking.
It's definitely a conversation we've probably had in the past, right? It's funny, leading towards the Lockbit takedown. I always said that I didn't think sanctions were going to be very effective. Fast forward to we saw Lockbit coming out with their advertisements for Lockbit 4.0, and then we were going to see Lockbit 4.0 turn into this new RAS that they're operating. We haven't seen that operationalize in the United States. We've been seeing it in the EU. We've been seeing it in other locations. I don't know if it's correlated to the sanctions and the inability to pay Lockbit, but what I can say is if you look across the published Lockbit victims on their blog sites, they're not US based.
Interesting.
Shows the power of sanctions.
What a show.
This was a good one. Yeah, we are 1 minute left.
Sorry.
Actually, I
Always
have
about
a
the
parting
bag,
statement, Stu. Jason?
No, please, everybody, follow Bob Parisi on LinkedIn. Follow Frank Brennan on LinkedIn. Guys, follow us. We'll have another show for you next month. We do this the first Friday of every month. We have some exciting new guests. If you want to be on the show, if you've already let us know you want to be on the show,
You can get on the waiting list.
Always figure out that scheduling. And if you do want to be on the show, you can certainly let us know. We've been surprised by the amount of requests that we've gotten, and we're very flattered. And so we thank you guys, and it's been an awesome show. Have an awesome weekend.